The Development of Metaphysics in Persia, a structural and critical analysis of Sir Muhammad Iqbal's doctoral thesis. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Sufi Essence with Hamid Said. In the vast and intricate tapestry of Islamic thought, few figures have cast a shadow as profound and multifaceted as Sir Muhammad Iqbal, a poet, a jurist, a political theorist, and a philosopher. Iqbal's intellectual project was a monumental effort to rejuvenate the Islamic world by reevaluating its philosophical heritage in light of modern challenges. While his poetic masterpieces and political speeches are widely celebrated, the foundational text of his philosophical project is often overlooked. His doctoral thesis, The Development of Metaphysics in Persia, submitted to the University of Munich in 1908, this book is far more than a mere academic exercise. It is a pioneering work of intellectual history that challenged the prevailing Eurocentric view of Islamic philosophy, a meticulous scholarly defense of Persian metaphysical thought, and, most importantly, a subtle but decisive declaration of Iqbal's own unique philosophical trajectory. Today, we will undertake a comprehensive structural and critical analysis of this seminal work. We will move beyond a simple summary to engage with the intricate architecture of Iqbal's scholarship and his overarching argument. We will argue that this book is a pioneering effort to construct a coherent intellectual history of Persian metaphysics, challenging Orientalist views by demonstrating an organic development of philosophical ideas from pre-Islamic thought to post-Ghazalian Sufism. In doing so, Iqbal not only reclaimed the intellectual dignity of a rich philosophical tradition, but also subtly laid the groundwork for his own unique philosophy of the individual self, or Khudi, which would define his later work. Our discourse will follow the historical and philosophical progression of Iqbal's book from the pre-Islamic roots of Persian thought to the culmination of its mystical metaphysics, all while keeping a critical eye on Iqbal's own philosophical subtext. Part 1. The context and Iqbal's methodological approach. To fully appreciate the significance of the development of metaphysics in Persia, one must first understand the intellectual landscape in which it was written. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, European Orientalist scholarship often viewed Islamic philosophy as a mere appendage to Greek thought. The prevailing narrative was that Muslim thinkers, having rediscovered Aristotle and Plato, simply translated and commented on their works, with no original contributions of their own. Furthermore, this scholarship often failed to distinguish between the various intellectual traditions within the Islamic world. Lumping together the rationalistic philosophy of the Peripatetics with the intuitive, mystical metaphysics of the Sufis, Iqbal's thesis was a direct intellectual counter-narrative to this prevailing view. Iqbal's methodological approach is one of the most remarkable aspects of the book. He does not simply provide a chronological list of Persian thinkers and their ideas. Instead, he engages in a critical analysis of the development of philosophical ideas themselves. His focus is on the intellectual lineage, showing how concepts and themes were transmitted, transformed, and refined across centuries. He begins with a clear definition of metaphysics, not as a static body of knowledge, but as a dynamic process of intellectual and spiritual inquiry into the nature of ultimate reality. This dynamic view of metaphysics allows him to trace a continuous thread from the pre-Islamic Zoroastrians to the great Sufi masters. Iqbal's scholarship is characterized by a meticulous use of primary sources, a rare feat for a scholar of his time. He delves into the original texts of Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, and the works of both the rationalist philosophers and the mystics. This intellectual honesty and rigor allowed him to challenge the Orientalist narrative from within, using their own tools of scholarship to dismantle their preconceived notions. His capacity for synthetic thought is also on full display. He is able to see the connections between seemingly disparate traditions, to find the philosophical thread that links a Zoroastrian concept of good and evil to a later Sufi concept of divine unity. This is the true development that he chronicles. Not a list of names and dates, but the organic evolution of a philosophical tradition. Part 2. From pre-Islamic Persia to the rise of mysticism. The first half of Iqbal's book is a masterful exercise in intellectual genealogy, tracing the development of Persian metaphysics from its ancient indigenous roots to its Islamic culmination. This section is crucial for his argument, as it demonstrates that Persian philosophy had an internal logic and a pre-existing intellectual framework that allowed it to reinterpret and transform foreign ideas. Iqbal begins with the pre-Islamic roots of Persian thought, particularly Zoroastrianism and Manichaeism. He dedicates an entire chapter to this, arguing that the Zoroastrian doctrine of a cosmic dualism between a good principle, Ahura Mazda, and an evil principle, Angra Mainyu, had a lasting impact on Persian thought. This dualism, though later rejected by Orthodox Islam, gave rise to a deep metaphysical concern with the problem of good and evil and the ultimate unity of reality. He also discusses Manichaeism, which, though an offshoot of Zoroastrianism, introduced a new set of ideas about the nature of light and darkness, which would later be reinterpreted by the philosophers of illumination. Iqbal then moves to the influence of Greek thought. He is nuanced in his approach, acknowledging the immense impact of Aristotle and Plato on Muslim philosophers. However, he argues that the Persian thinkers were not mere translators or commentators. They were active reinterpreters, who adapted Greek ideas to the unique, spiritual and theological demands of Islam. He discusses key figures like Al-Khudi and Al-Farabi, and shows how their rationalistic Aristotelian metaphysics was received and adapted in the Persian world. This adaptation was not a passive process, but a creative one, where Greek concepts were bent to serve Islamic theological ends. The central theme that emerges from this section is the gradual shift from a purely rationalistic metaphysics to a more intuitive, mystical one. Iqbal charts this transition with meticulous detail, showing how a rationalistic approach to philosophy eventually gave way to a deeply spiritual and often anti-rationalistic metaphysics. He traces the rise of the early Sufis and their unique approach to knowledge, which they called dak, or intuition. This intuitive form of knowledge, which transcended the categories of the intellect, would become the cornerstone of later Persian metaphysics. Iqbal shows that this was not a rejection of philosophy, but its spiritualization, where the quest for ultimate truth was no longer confined to the syllogism, but was sought in the direct, unmediated experience of the divine. Part 3. The culmination of Persian metaphysics. The second half of the book is a masterful analysis of the high point of Persian metaphysics, from the Peripatetics to the great mystics. It is here that Iqbal's critical eye is at its sharpest. As he engages with the philosophical systems that would later become the primary intellectual antagonists of his own thought, Iqbal dedicates a significant portion of his work to the towering figure of Ibn Sina Avicenna. He presents Ibn Sina as the ultimate synthesizer of Greek rationalism and Islamic theology. Iqbal meticulously analyzes Ibn Sina's metaphysics, especially his famous distinction between essence mahiyya and existence wujud. For Ibn Sina, existence is an accident that is added to the essence of a thing. God, as the necessary existent, is the only being in whom essence and existence are one. Iqbal also discusses Ibn Sina's theory of emanation, where the universe is seen as a series of necessary emanations from the necessary existent. Iqbal's critical analysis here is subtle. He appreciates Ibn Sina's intellectual power, but hints at the philosophical and spiritual passivity that this system of emanation could engender. The next major intellectual event that Iqbal chronicles is the Ghazalian Revolution. He argues that the great Imam al-Ghazali, in his profound critique of the philosophers, did not kill philosophy, but rather forced it to evolve. Ghazali's skepticism about the power of pure reason to reach ultimate truth opened the door for a more intuitive, mystical approach to metaphysics. Iqbal shows that after Ghazali, the intellectual climate of Persia changed. The philosophers could no longer rely on Aristotelian logic alone. They had to ground their philosophy in spiritual experience and direct intuition. This leads Iqbal to his most important analysis: the development of Sufi metaphysics. He meticulously examines the metaphysical systems of key figures like Sir Muhammad Iqbal, founder of the philosophy of illumination, Ishraq, and Mu'ayyidin ibn Arabi, the architect of the doctrine of the unity of being Wadad al-Wujud. Iqbal presents Suhrawardi's philosophy as a beautiful synthesis of Zoroastrian concepts of light and darkness with Islamic mysticism, where all of reality is seen as a hierarchy of divine light. He then delves into Ibn Arabi's profound and controversial doctrine of Wadad al-Wujud, which posits that there is only one reality, and everything in the universe is a manifestation of that reality. Iqbal's analysis of Ibn Arabi is both appreciative and critical. He praises Ibn Arabi's intellectual audacity and his ability to construct a systematic metaphysics of mystical experience. However, he begins to subtly plant the seeds of his own critique, suggesting that while this monistic philosophy is beautiful, its ultimate conclusion of the absorption of the individual self into the divine could lead to a spiritual passivity that is detrimental to human development. Part 4. Iqbal's own philosophical trajectory. Having concluded his historical survey, we can now step back and analyze the meta-narrative of the book. The Development of Metaphysics in Persia is not a purely objective historical account. It is a deeply personal and foundational document for Iqbal's own philosophical project. His historical analysis is a journey of intellectual self-discovery, where he is not just an observer, but an active participant, evaluating the strengths and weaknesses of each philosophical system in light of his own emerging worldview. The book's most profound and subtle contribution is the groundwork it lays for Iqbal's philosophy of Khudi, or the unique individual self. His historical analysis of the Persian tradition, which culminates in the monistic metaphysics of Ibn Arabi, serves as a crucial intellectual precursor to his own philosophical break. Iqbal's critique of pantheistic monism is foreshadowed in his historical account. While he praises the intuitive depth of Sufi metaphysics, he subtly questions its final conclusion. For Iqbal, the ultimate goal of the spiritual journey is not the annihilation of the self-fana into the divine, but the strengthening and preservation of the self. The individual self is not an illusion to be transcended, but a reality to be perfected. The universe is not a static emanation from God, but a dynamic, creative process in which the individual self, with its free will and creativity, is an active participant. This is where Iqbal's unique intellectual project comes into full view: the synthesis of the rich, mystical tradition of the East with the dynamic, active philosophy of the West, particularly the thought of figures like Bergson and Nietzsche. Iqbal sought to recover the spiritual depth of Islamic thought, without succumbing to the spiritual passivity that he felt had come to dominate certain schools of Sufism. His thesis is a testament to this project. It is a work of immense scholarly rigor that, on the surface, is a defense of Persian thought, but on a deeper level is an intellectual justification for his own revolutionary philosophical vision. In the end, the Development of Metaphysics in Persia is not just a historical account of a philosophical tradition. It is a declaration of intellectual independence, a work that recovered the dignity of Islamic philosophical thought, and, doing so, paved the way for one of the most profound and influential philosophical projects of the 20th century. It is a book that must be read, not just for its historical value, but for the light it sheds on the genius of a man who sought to awaken a sleeping nation by reminding them of their own spiritual and intellectual heritage. In conclusion, Sir Muhammad Iqbal's The Development of Metaphysics in Persia is a landmark work that successfully challenged a Eurocentric view of intellectual history by providing a meticulous internal account of a rich philosophical tradition. It is a testament to the intellectual power of a man who was deeply rooted in his tradition, yet engaged with the most pressing intellectual currents of his time. The book is not just a historical account, but a foundational text for Iqbal's own philosophy of the individual self, a work that laid the intellectual groundwork for his later poetic and philosophical masterpieces. Its enduring legacy is its ability to recover the intellectual dignity of Islamic philosophical thought and to provide a powerful example of how tradition can be a source of intellectual and spiritual rejuvenation. Thank you for joining us on this intellectual and spiritual journey. Please subscribe to our channel to continue our exploration of the rich and profound essence of Sufism.